but whoever's sort of overseeing the crew. And I just remember looking at him, he goes, "We appreciate everything you did for our country."
If you've been around here long enough, then you'd know that if there is anything I despise most in the world, it's making excuses for evil people. But that is exactly what seems to be happening. I have to be fair, we're still early stages here. In a new book titled Yes Ma'am, The Secret Life of Royal Servants by Tom Quinn, which is to be published on the 18th of February. So we've still got a while to go, but the Times UK, as it usually tends to do, has provided us with an extract from a chapter in the book about Meghan, Harry, and their short time within the royal bosom. The chapter starts off promising enough. It talks about Meghan's false American, quote unquote, idea of royalty, a false and laughable notion that we all saw right through during her engagement interview all those years ago. But more to the point, it talks about how Meghan married into the family expecting to marry a billionaire, only to realize that, shock horror, Harry was only worth about 20 million pounds. And once that happened, she realized she needed to reassess other assumptions she'd made about this strange new family. And a strange family they are indeed. I think I've always been open about the fact that I'm not a monarchist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not a royalist. I really don't like the idea of people, a group of people, a family being anointed by God or being better than the rest of us. They're just human. They bleed and cry and eat and get sick just as the rest of us do. And so reading about their lives and how every little thing is micromanaged by their staff, also known as servants, let's be real here, was quite extraordinary, to say the least. Without digressing too much away from the main topic, the article has a few photos which really make you kind of pause and think about how far this royalty thing can be taken. They need people to hold up their umbrellas. They need people to take off their boots after a fancy game of polo. They need people to help them take off their coats. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they need people to spoon feed them food sometimes. I don't know. I'm not trying to be mean here, but some of these things are ridiculous. Even the current queen, Queen Camilla, found it so ridiculous and wanted to get away from it all in a sentiment that really echoed a very young Marie Antoinette in the 18th century upon her arrival at Versailles. According to the book, Queen Camilla would regularly say to Charles, "Can't we get away from all this protocol? It's all BS." Speaking of the king, the author really wasted no time in discussing the notoriously short temper, fiery temper of the male members of the royal family, including Prince William. But when Tom Quinn gets to Meghan, however, he seems to have a much softer approach, which makes me question whether he's the most trustworthy and impartial source there is to write a book about what went on behind palace doors. From the very beginning, when the author comments on Meghan's false assumptions about the family, he uses her American background as a justification for this. Of course, given Meghan came from an American background, that assumption was perfectly understandable. We've talked at length prior about how ridiculous this line of reasoning is, especially when you consider the fact that Meghan was not some teenage, early 20 ingenue sheltered from some country town who had never been out in the world and lived a full life. She was a worldly woman. She had a career as an actress. She had been married once before. She had traveled the world. And more importantly, she actually put herself out as this very well-informed, educated graduate of an international relations degree or major. We even talked in my last video, The Husk, about how she would brag about being a politician before she sunk her teeth into Hollywood. The extract talks about how she really disliked the hierarchy within the family. Well, then don't marry into such a family. In fact, I'll take this one step further. Why are we pretending that Meghan Markle doesn't have or hasn't had extensive experience with hierarchy? Literally, she was a numbered woman, an unnamed numbered woman on Deal or No Deal. But even besides that, when she was an actress, she was 6th on the call sheet. How do we know that? Because there was a hierarchy. Now, that's not to say that Meghan didn't dislike the hierarchy. I have no doubt that she really struggled with the concept of not being on top, of not being the queen bee herself. Make no mistake, that is the only thing that Meghan dislikes about the hierarchy. Had the hierarchy put her on top, she'd love it just as it is and would probably instantly get rid of anyone who wants to change a thing. What can only be described as her grandiose narcissism and blatant disregard of protocol was sugarcoated by the author and his apparent sources by calling her a modernizer by nature. Someone who wanted to get things done and change the status quo. Again, what did I just say? I promise you, had that status quo seen her on top, she wouldn't want to change a thing. And that's what this book and this author is completely missing. I don't know if he's doing it on purpose, as in he's a Meghan Markle sympathizer, he certainly sounds like one, or he just didn't think deeper. He didn't think beyond the excuses that Meghan has been offering up herself, most notably in their Harry and Meghan Netflix reality show. And what really makes me question Tom Quinn and where his loyalties lie, I suppose, and his impartiality or lack thereof, is this constant attack on not just the royal family themselves with their bad tempers and bad habits and their quirky lifestyle, but also the old guard, as they're called in the book, the courtiers that the royal family work very close with and listen to. Throughout this article, the old guard are described as a snobby, elitist set of people who don't like foreigners from America coming over and trying to change things. I literally made an entire series last year called Why Meghan Markle Failed as a Royal. I think it's 4 or 5 parts long, talking about every facet that Meghan picked as a reason for her failure, or her rejection rather, her perceived rejection. And I attacked it with logic and examples of other women who came from foreign backgrounds, who were commoners, who were people of color, and had still managed to not only survive their aristocratic or royal surroundings, but thrive, as Meghan aspires to. So, hate to break it to you, Tom, her Americanism has nothing to do with it. Otherwise, why did Jason Knopf thrive, actually, in his role within the royal family? He's American. I think it's an insult to Americans worldwide to just pretend that they're all rude and blunt and ignorant and divisive and destructive by nature. It's got nothing to do with her being an American and everything to do with her, quite frankly, being a rotten egg. And the book actually contradicts itself in this very extract. So first, we hear that, oh, the old guard don't like people from America coming over and changing things. And then later on, towards the end, Tom himself admits that they felt the exact same way about Catherine. They didn't like Catherine because she too was an outsider. Forgive me, but last I checked, Catherine is an English rose, as they call them. She's not American. How do you explain that? That's right, you don't. The thing about Catherine that really distinguishes her from Meghan is that, number one, she clearly doesn't suffer from a very high degree of narcissism. And that has always been Meghan's Achilles heel. I have an entire series on that called The Curse of the Narcissist. Unlike Meghan, who wanted to swoop in, according to the staff, and change things from the very beginning, she wanted to run the show and refused to learn a thing, Catherine watched and learned and adapted accordingly. As the book says, Kate is someone who slowly and carefully absorbs the atmosphere of a place, the relationship between people, and the rules. She doesn't jump in straight away and try to change everything to suit her way of thinking. She bides her time and is very intelligent and intuitive about other people, what they do, and how they behave. And most crucially, Kate was always happy to accept advice both from the lower staff, with whom she got on very well, and from the courtiers, even though some of them were initially very snooty about her. But Kate is actually a much stronger person than Meghan in many ways. And yet what Meghan saw as Kate being pushed around, Kate saw as an essential part of being a member of the royal family. And I think that is spot on what we have all been saying for years now. Catherine is a bulwark, and true strength is silent. True confidence is silent. It just radiates out of you. You don't have to scream it from the rooftops the way Meghan does. You don't have to force it down our throats. And I think based on the trajectory, the very different trajectories actually, that these two women are now on, I think we can easily determine which of these two women have a winning attitude. Do you remember the engagement interview when Meghan and Harry were both beaming and overflowing with compliments about William and Catherine and the royal family and how amazing and welcoming they've been? Of course, if you ask Meghan now about that, she'll tell you it was an
orchestrated reality show.
But I think we can all tell what's genuine and what's not. And if the staff over at the palace are anything to go by, Meghan and Harry's engagement version of the story seems to be closer to the truth. As the book says, it's easy to forget that when Harry first started dating Meghan, both William and Kate found her delightful. They thought she was a breath of fresh air. But then, something that a lot of people have actually noticed, have picked up on as early as 2018, if not late 2017, was the discomfort that permeated the air whenever Meghan was around Prince William. Very early on, tensions developed between William and Harry as a result of Meghan's warm, friendly, hug-everyone approach. At least that's how Tom Quinn wants to describe it. I think the rest of us would find the word inappropriate behavior a little more befitting of the situation. Tom seems to follow Meghan's entire concept of, oh, I'm an American, I wear ripped jeans and I hug people, I'm a hugger, whereas Brits are so formal and uptight, because that's exactly how he describes members of the royal family in his book. So basically, it's not Meghan's fault that she made people uncomfortable. It's that they're all stiff Brits with a stick up their bum. But more importantly, Meghan's behavior made William in particular, and possibly I would say Catherine, naturally as his wife, incredibly uncomfortable because she became way too familiar, way too fast, and way too often. As the book says, Meghan hugged him virtually every time they bumped into each other. The hugging and cheek kissing fueled gossip among the staff that Meghan was flirting with William, which she obviously was not, according to Tom Quinn. But the tense atmosphere caused by all the touchy-feeliness and the resultant gossip deepened the rift between the brothers. Tom then goes on to blame William's rather awkward, even inhibited personality on this awkwardness. Not Meghan overstepping her boundaries as a woman that was soon to be married to his own brother, and not to mention the fact that William himself was a happily married man. No, it was William's attitude. So what, are we to believe that William should have been happy to kiss and hug Meghan whenever she pleased? To hell with Catherine and decency and dignity and morality? Actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, I think Meghan would say yes. Absolutely. I expect nothing less. She even had the audacity to remark and complain about the stiffness and the rigidity and formality in Prince William and King Charles's interactions. This from a woman who doesn't even talk to her own father. At least these two, with the issues that they had to go through very publicly, I might add, actually still have a relationship. One thing we can all agree on, we as the audience looking in from the outside and the palace staff who were interviewed for this book, is that Meghan Markle has a performative messiah complex. Now the book says a messiah complex, and I added the word performative because all she wants to do is come across as this savior, not actually do things to be seen that way. What really makes Meghan in particular a complicated, confounding case is her desire to want to be a victim, a martyr, just as much as she wants to be a heroine. Even her latest manic Instagram reel. I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. I'm sure you all know and you've seen it by now. Meghan bragging, name dropping about how in the midst of all the chaos of her being a disaster tourist along with her husband, she brags about how she got a girl a signed Billie Eilish set of merch after the girl had lost her t-shirt in the fire. Look, sometimes when I watch back my content as I'm editing it, I go, maybe I was a bit too hard. Let them do whatever they think will help people. But I always come back to this. And I've said this before, very recently actually. I don't have a problem with them doing these little things. You know, people always criticize them for doing the bare minimum. To me, I see it as at least they're doing something. However, do you have to put it out there and share it with the rest of the world? Is that the only thing that gives it meaning, that gives it significance to you, Meghan? You couldn't just do this good deed, if it actually happened at all, in silence, behind the scenes, without announcing it to the world on Instagram before she even told the girl's own mother. It's so interesting to me how she lets us into her mind without knowing, how she thinks her way of thinking is so normal because it's the only way of thinking that she knows, telling us that her priority was showing off to the world, bragging to us about what a good person she is, what a savior, before she even informed the people involved. And she didn't see anything bizarre or performative or inauthentic, to use her lingo, in doing that. But in any case, I digress. For Meghan, if the camera didn't catch it, it didn't happen. Now in the palace, we know how her victimhood played out because she wouldn't shut up about it, quite frankly. In a nutshell, it was racism. Yes, there was jealousy thrown around and competition and, oh, I don't want to outshine everyone because I'm so brilliant. I'm a blinding light. I had to dim my own light to make everyone else shine. But it was primarily racism. But one thing I believe we don't talk enough about, at least on my channel, is how her Messiah complex played out behind palace walls. Not that we needed the staff to confirm this, but she saw herself, or at least made Harry believe, that she was rescuing him. Remember how we talked about how he was trapped his entire life and he just didn't know it? And now the family he left behind are just as trapped and just as oblivious as he had been? Meghan had convinced him that she saved him. And I believe he said that. He said those very words in the Oprah interview. She saved me. Saved him from what, you might ask? Well, from his sparedom, I suppose. But here's the kicker. If Tom Quinn's sources are to be believed, Harry was not all that bothered about being the spare and about his place in the royal family, at least not openly so, until Meghan Markle came along. He didn't have an issue living in Nottingham Cottage, for instance, until that is 2017, when Meghan moved in for free as a royal girlfriend, not even a fiance at the time, and started to do what she does best. Compare herself with William and Catherine. The constant jealousy, envy, competitive mindset that she has. Because make no mistake, that's what fuels the likes of Meghan Markle. Jealousy, envy, content. They just want to win. Doesn't matter why. They just do. To quote the book, moving into Nottingham Cottage in 2017 compounded the tension. Meghan felt it was so small that it must be a reflection on how the royal family were belittling her husband. She saw Kate and William living just a few yards away in Kensington Palace itself with teams of live-in servants. All this does is reaffirm everything we've already known, really. We talked a lot about Meghan's sense of entitlement and the curse of being a narcissist, the curse of never appreciating what you have, the amazing things that you have. In her case, living in a beautiful home on palace grounds, with servants at your beck and call. And yet she complained about being restricted by protocol, and the very servants I mentioned? Well, she complained about them too, but not for the reasons that you may think. Apparently, Meghan both loved having everything done for her by the domestic staff, of course she did, who wouldn't, and also hated it. As one former staffer said, through absolutely no fault of her own, I'm sorry, I highly doubt someone started off a sentence in that way. Meghan wasn't always great with staff. Again, this is through absolutely no fault of her own. It's not that she's a nasty, mean bully. She just wasn't used to it. So one minute she'd be really friendly, perhaps over-friendly, and the next she would be irritated by the fact that they wouldn't respond instantly at all times of the day and night. And we've heard this one before. Those 5 a.m. emails, which she had to clap back and say, no, look at my signature. Remember that little signature? Just because I'm working on this time, it doesn't mean you have to respond. Clearly that signature meant absolutely nothing to her, because we know what happened when staff didn't respond at all hours of the night and morning. It's true that her nickname for a while was the Duchess of Difficult, but she had other friendlier nicknames, including Mystic Meg, which came about because she was so new agey, so woke about so many things. She could be difficult because she was finding life difficult, trying to feel her way and work out the intricacies of a positively medieval, labyrinthine system. Once again, it's never Meghan's fault. Did the staff actually believe it was through absolutely no fault of her own, and that she was just difficult because she was finding life difficult? Or is Tom sugarcoating and excusing her behavior? I don't know. It just seems so unnatural for a staff member to say that, especially when they probably saw how, as Harry admitted in his own book, their fellow staff members were slumped across desks, crying. Meghan felt that Harry was too deferential to both his family and to the people who worked for them. She didn't like the fact that Harry tended to ask staff if they would mind tidying up or bringing something to him. With her American background, she felt when you pay people to do something, you just issue commands, and that Harry should just issue commands, as she did. And we've heard this before. Oh, it's just Meghan's American way. She's just blunt like that. It's how Americans act. No. Americans watching this video, let me know if you mistreat people simply because they're being paid to do something. Meghan's Messiah complex went far beyond convincing Harry that he should be nasty to the staff simply because they work for him. Harry, by all accounts, became her enabler and became a terror himself in doing so. There is the infamous Tiara Gate story, where Harry yelled, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets." It is referenced in this book, except Tom Quinn does the unthinkable when he excuses her behavior by saying that it was because she was an American foreign woman of color. As Tom Quinn put it, had Meghan been an English aristocrat, the problem with the tiara and much else besides might not have arisen, as the old guard at the palace might have been more willing to accommodate an aristocrat's wishes. Look, I don't have enough information to say that that is blatantly untrue, but it just seems so far on the sugarcoating end, on the excusing her behavior end, that permeates through this entire chapter or this extract. We all know the story behind Tiara Gate. I'm not going to repeat it here. And I highly doubt, given how the royal family and courtiers bent over backwards to accommodate both Meghan and Harry, I highly doubt that they would have told her no without good reason. And I highly doubt that the Queen would have been so swayed by those who worked for her. But back to the Messiah complex, Meghan was focused on how she could become the best known and most loved member of the royal family. Again, all about appearances. It's what I talked about in my last video, The Husk. Her primary concern, nay, her sole concern, is how is this going to make me look? The staff member goes on to say, I don't mean that in a critical way because all her big ideas were about doing good. She once said, what Diana started, I wanted to finish. But she really wanted to do it as a princess and with the full backing of the royal family, but on a part-time basis, on her terms, whenever she felt like it. I don't see how these staff members didn't see it for what it really was, which was a Diana cosplay, a disgusting Oedipus complex playing out before their very eyes. Towards the end, there is an acknowledgement of Meghan's folly in believing that she could join a 1,000-year-old institution and change it according to her whims. Do things her way. And the chapter ends off on quite a poignant note, actually, given all the sugarcoating we've had to survive. Tom Quinn writes, The irony, given all that has been written about Harry being the spare, is that at Kensington Palace, it was clearly Meghan who felt she could not find her place. She too was a spare. I've never seen it that way, but I cannot disagree with that statement because it's a different way of saying what we've all been saying all along, which is if she couldn't be the queen bee, then she couldn't handle it. She couldn't stay. She had to burn the place down, metaphorically. I don't know anything about Tom Quinn. I've never heard his name before. But overall, this chapter read entirely as too forgiving on Meghan and quite harsh on not just the royal family, but members of the palace staff, the courtiers, the higher-ups as well. The timing too was oddly fortuitous in Meghan's favor. You know, this is all in the wake of the Vanity Fair article, the whole disaster tourist debacle, and of course the Hollywood Reporter article from last year. So it does make one wonder, is Tom Quinn in cahoots with a certain couple in Montecito?